to go ahead and get started. I'm Doug Yellowland, developer. We'll make another introduction here in just a second. But we really want to thank you for coming this evening. And we want to share, really tonight is about sharing information. It's about sort of updating you. I can tell you that as the developer here in Whisper, and part of the TARS Investment Holdings team, when we bought this 2,000 acres and when we put together the concepts here, we knew that we were going on a bit of a journey. As a principle, we're innovators. We think that land development and home construction is evolving, and I really feel like Whisper Valley is at the very front edge of that evolution. And we made a commitment to certain high principles here in Whisper Valley. And you folks have shown us that there is a demand for the principles that we have, and we're on this journey together. As you know, we have 700 acres here of programmed open space that as the community develops, we want to take advantage of that. We believe in healthy living. We believe that the world of housing is changing and that technology is here to stay, and so that we have to think about technology. But the thing that we're probably most known for is our concepts and our commitment to sustainable development principles. And when we talk about green, we all know that that's kind of an interesting subject right now. What is really green, and how should that be accomplished? Our interpretation of green has been to be friendly to the earth and to create efficiencies, to help save people money, and to take advantage of some of the natural principles behind land development. We talk about the earth and the heat that's stored there, and the things that we can do with that, solar things that we can do with that. And so when we as a developer made a decision to align ourselves and to create a company called EcoSmart Solution, we were really looking at that as our way of being green and our way of developing sustainable principles. And we brought some of the best minds together really in the world. We put together a team that put together a system that we're all familiar with, the EcoSmart system. And we've had tremendous success with it, but we've also learned. And each one of you have your own story, your own experience. And really what I want to say is that we're really on a journey together. We started by making the decision to develop the EcoSmart principles in the program. We invested literally millions of dollars to build the infrastructure around EcoSmart, and we really feel like it was the right decision. So I can tell you tonight from a developer's perspective, we're excited about that. But as you go along an innovative path, you can't help but learn. And some things we're really excited about, other things we see as a challenge. But the reason that we're together tonight is we want to give you some feedback. We're now about a year and a half and 2 years, which incidentally, how many of you have been here for less than a year? Most of you. So our first home's a year and a half. I know David back there. So some of you have now had a full season, for example, behind you experiencing the system. So we're at that sort of stage where we're beginning to get feedback. We know what our principles are, we know what we want to accomplish, but along the way, any innovative ideas, you have to have feedback. So now we've had a full year, almost 2 years of experience, and as we're beginning to get feedback, we're also building a team in ESS with some of the finest minds in the country, and you're going to meet some of those folks tonight, and in the near future, on December 5th, you'll have an opportunity to meet the rest of the ESS team. But that team is growing. And as that team grows, we're bringing people in that really understand the technology of the EcoSmart product package. And they're capable of developing really good information about how these systems are working. So with that time that we've had, we're at a point where we've evaluated our first experiences. And, excuse me, and tonight we want to provide some of that feedback to you. So this is sort of an informal discussion. We do have a planned presentation for you. And so let me quickly, the person that we'll be hearing from most is Greg Wolfson. And Greg is our Chief Technical Officer and has a tremendous amount of experience in the renewable field. And so around Greg, many of you know Rich Cooprider, and Rich is heading up our construction team. David back there, you all know, he was probably one of the first people that you met. Chad Levin, maybe some of you haven't met. Chad has recently, he's been our consultant for quite some time, but he's joining our team as what we call an asset manager. And you'll be spending more and more time interacting with Chad in terms of the experience that you're having. Many of you have met Phil Shern. Phil is the owner of Geo Enterprises, and this person has probably had more impact than anybody because he has a huge history of experience in geothermal all over the world. Phil is from Tulsa. He's really one of the finest minds in the world about geothermal. So tonight, as I said, we have a presentation. I hope I didn't forget somebody on our team. I don't need to introduce Kara. I mean, everybody here knows her. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg. He's going to go through the presentation. What we'd like to do is give him enough time to go through the full presentation, so that would mean hold your questions until the end. There's a very specific area that we want to talk with you about tonight, so we're going to try to keep the conversation channeled in that direction. But as we get further towards the end of the presentation, we're wide open to questions. Who did I forget?
I just want to interject real quick. For folks that aren't able to make it, we are going to be recording the discussion tonight. It is focused primarily up here in the front. It is not focused on y'all. But we will be able to record everything we're saying, and we will post it to Town Square.
Yeah. One of the neat things that this character here did, David, do you notice you can look at every screen, and we have the same presentation? First time I've seen this, I kind of like it. So everybody ought to be able to see it. And David, thank you for doing this. So with that, Greg, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Edward. Thank you very much for all attending and coming. I see some familiar faces with folks who have been in your homes and had the pleasure to work on your systems or see how your systems are operating. A little bit about my background so you know where I come from. I'm officially on loan from Shell. So Shell, New Energies, the group New Energies within Shell, created a joint venture with Taurus Investment Holdings, which is the larger developer for Whisper Valley. And they spun out EcoSmart. Now, EcoSmart Solutions was an effort that Taurus had been working on for some time, but this joint venture spun that out as its own independent entity with the focus of delivering these energy infrastructure for communities like Whisper Valley, first and foremost Whisper Valley, but other communities. And as part of that, I engineered, or it was engineered for me, however it was looked at, that I would take over the role as the Chief Technology Officer for the new venture. So I am an lone employee with EcoSmart Solutions. And I've been on board now since April, so it's been about 6-7 months of being on board, and I've had a chance to work in the community now for a bit of time. My background, interestingly enough, Austin holds a special place for me because when I was first interested in getting into solar, I had put solar on my home in 2002 in California. In fact, I had the approval to interconnect from PG&E, which was a big deal back then. I got that framed on my wall, and I said, this is really cool, this is great stuff. And a friend of mine who I'd worked with in the tech space a while back, he said, if you're really serious about this, you should really dive in with 2 full feet, jump in. And there's this conference, the American Solar Energy Society, which was the early genesis of a lot of the solar work in the United States. They're holding a conference, their annual conference in Austin, Texas. Austin's a cool place. Why don't we all go down there and see what this industry is all about? So in 2003, ACES held their annual conference here in Austin, which was my first chance to see the organized industry, the kind of the nascent industry of solar, really developing. It was really an exciting time. We had a good time in Austin, and the conference was a lot of fun and kind of really energized me to say, hey, this is something I want to do. So I have spent quite a bit of time in different capacities. I worked as the Chief Technology Officer for a commercial solar developer, developing large-scale commercial systems for schools and cities. I've also worked to start up a storage group with Enphase Energy, so I know a bit about energy storage. And my last work was with Shell, trying to figure out how Shell New Energies could really make an impact, and this being one that we think we're very excited about. So that's my background, and I'm very excited to be here. And with that, why don't we just dive into the material. David, if you would give me my first slide. Great. So, coming on board, one of my first welcoming events was the fact that people were not finding comfort in the homes that they had expected or had wanted to see. So, initial reports really focused in the beginning of the summer on humidity issues. That was the big thing we started hearing about. A lot of people were saying it's humidity, and I said, well, I remember coming here early on in April and seeing that we couldn't start on phase 2 because it was all muddy, and I said, well, of course there's humidity issues. It's constantly raining. Well, when the rain stopped, there were still humidity issues, and they got more pronounced. So we launched at that time an effort to try to understand what was going on, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the interesting thing is that this past summer has been a tale of 2 summers. The first part was high humidity, and then the humidity started to dry out some, and then we started to have some folks responding to the fact that they were having trouble keeping their indoor temperatures where they expected them to be, and the heat pumps really struggling with that. So that was sort of mid to late summer, really into the fall. And so we found approximately a dozen homes of the folks who had come to us that seemed to be a good cross-section, different size homes, different orientations, different makeup, different types of heat pumps, to be able to track and to do some detailed investigation of what was actually going on. So we used that sort of as our lens to see what was happening. And the real question was fundamentally, we went through a process where we were following all of the City of Austin building codes and the Austin Energy Clean Building requirements. And as far as we could tell, these systems were all as they should be. And so why would there be these problems? So that was kind of the question. Why would there be these problems? So if we go to the next slide. Before I jump into the process we went through, I want to tell you a little bit about how the systems are now being designed. Now, as Douglas mentioned, this has been a long process, and so it's evolved over time as we've learned. But now, going forward, how the systems are designed is sort of laid out here. During the early part of the process, a builder will submit to the developer a potential floor plan they wish to build in the development. And as part of that, one part of that review will be where EcoSmart, so the technical team, will look at that floor plan and run on it a model or calculations to determine what is the heating and cooling load of that floor plan. What is the expected heating and cooling load? And we use something called Manual J standard, and that's the Air Conditioning Contractor Association's defined process for doing that calculations. It's also the process that Austin Energy Green Building has mandated we should use. So it's both the industry and it's what in the region of Austin you have to use to get a permit. So we do that up front and we say, okay, well, based on this floor plan here in Whisper Valley in Austin, here's basically the heating and cooling loads that this home will experience. And then here is the type of heat pump system, the size and the type of heat pump that will meet that load. That's the process we go through. We provide this information to the builders because the builder is ultimately responsible for this process. They're the ones that go out and get the permit and they put together everything they're going to go ahead and build and they submit that to the city. They do that, and then the portion of the city that reviews this aspect is Austin Energy Greenfield. They're the ones who look at that and say, yep, you followed the protocols, you're following the regulations that's prescribed. That looks like a good system to put in. They do this for all heating and cooling systems in the entire Austin region. So it's not just ground source heat pumps, but it's any air conditioning or heating system that you're going to put into a new building in Austin. One of the things that is an important element is the fact that, and I've noticed this myself, within Whisper Valley, I'll go into some homes and the set points on this will be above 75 degrees, because that's what the homeowner feels is comfortable, depending upon the relative humidity. Whereas others, it's below 75 degrees. The ACA standard says that you should do your sizing at 75 degrees in the winter, summer. So cool to 75, and then you should heat to 70. And so AEGB has adopted those. In the end of this presentation, we're going to post the presentation on Town Square after this. I have captured, actually Chad found it, we captured all the behavioral recommendations, and they are quite extensive, from Austin Energy Greenville about what they recommend that a person or family should do to reduce their energy costs. And one of the things they recommend is that you set it to 78. So that's a behavioral recommendation they make. But when we do the modeling and when we size it, the mandated level is 75 degrees cool. Now, 75 degrees, when it's 50% relative humidity, actually could feel cool, depending upon the individual. 75 degrees at 60-65% relative humidity could feel really stifling warm. So the relative humidity plays a very big role, as well as individual comfort. But just to put it out there, that's what's being used in terms of the set points. Okay, so with that in mind, what did we do this summer and this fall? I think we sent a email out to the general community. When did we send it out? Some in August, I think we sent it out. Basically saying, we've heard that there are concerns, we've done this investigation, we launched some effort, that was kind of like a midstream report. This is now the work that we did to get to conclusions, which we will get to in the slide too. So the first thing
There might be a clarification question.
Yeah, and I just, from a homeowner perspective, relative comfort is an issue or is a concern, but then also for many of us who are here in the Austin area are also concerned about mold prevention.
yes.
So that's a bigger reason for many of us why we want our humidity levels
Absolutely.
lower rather than higher.
So when the humidity issue came up, we said, well, actually, what is the right level of humidity? Now, obviously, there's comfort, but what is the right humidity from the EPA level in terms of mold prevention? It's the data that we've seen. There's a little bit of variation, but basically, if you get above 65% relative humidity, that's considered a situation which is conducive to mold. There's other recommendations that say above 60.
Right.
So we're trying to, and it will vary depending upon what happens in your home, to be 55 and below is what we're trying to target. Okay? So that is a very important issue, especially if there's a lot of other moisture in the air and other considerations. Right? The other thing to keep in mind about humidity is that if you have had something that's brought water into the home, excessive water, it will take a while for that to dry out. So that, unlike in a dry air environment, you can change the temperature fairly quickly once you turn on the system. If there's a lot of humidity, especially if it's wicked materials, it takes a while for that to dry out. That's just something to be aware of. So, yes, that's a good point. All right. So what we did this summer is the first thing is we went out to AEGB, we had a meeting with them, and we said, okay, so here's some initial reports we're getting, here's what we're looking at, let's make sure level set to understand, what are the mandates, what are the rules, what are the regulations, what's the process that we can go forward with. We talked to some key folks in terms of technology, the geothermal system that we have, the heat pumps. We talked to both Bosch and Enertech, which are the heat pumps that we used. We actually visited them, and we had them visit us. We got a lot of additional data and things to go after and investigate. Then we had Rich actually went out and put into several homes humidistats to actually measure humidity and temperature to correlate with what homeowners were telling us. We actually had some concern that the Nest systems might not actually be reporting correctly. Well, we found out that on the whole, the nest is pretty good. The only thing I would caution you is if you have a nest like right next to a bathroom or something, maybe it would read something different. Or if you have a nest, in one instance there was a nest that was right in a hallway, and we were all congregating in the hallway, and I noticed that reading was quite higher than if I just stepped out into the living area and there was another nest in the temperature. So there can be variations, but the nest has proven to be fairly accurate where it sits. That's at least the data we got. And it also did confirm that the reports that people were giving us in the whole were absolutely right. I mean, the temperatures were not where they wanted them to be, and the humidity in some cases was higher than what it should be. So we said, okay, all right, so there were issues here. So we said, well, let's take a look at the heat pumps. I mean, because clearly, if the heat pumps, something wrong with the heat pumps, then that would be the cause of it. So we invited, strongly invited, both Bosch and Enertech to send their top technicians out. And we went up into many folks' attics. Must have been, well, I was up in at least 10 or 12 attics myself, looking at Bosch and Enertech systems, but there were others that they went out and checked. And in all cases, we basically had Wayland, who actually is our technical person many of you have met or know, and he actually implemented the test, and we had the Bosch technician, Enertech technician, make sure that the test was done according to their standards, right, and they agreed with it. And in every single case, every single machine was within the operating performance characteristics of the machine. So it meant that the specs that the machine provided should have been being delivered because it was operating at a level. Now, there was some variation, but it was all within the level. What we did find was that the air, the fresh air intake, the air can, was most of the systems were air can intake, that many times it was not commissioned. It was sometimes not turned on and commissioned, not properly operating, in some cases not ducted correctly. So we noted that, made changes to that, that in some cases improved the performance, some cases not so much. We also found out in talking to the heat pump manufacturers that there was a special dehumidification mode, which had not been commissioned. And the way that works is, and you notice many of you who we've worked with, the Nest system has a way of detecting what the humidity level, not just temperature, but also humidity. And if you connect up the Nest correctly to the heat pump in a proper way, even if the temperature is below the threshold, if the humidity is too high, it will cause the heat pump to operate anyway to try to pull down the humidity. Now, when it does that, it operates the heat pump at a lower speed. And the reason for that is because it's commonly known. With an air conditioning unit, if you want to remove humidity, the best way to do that is to reduce the speed of the fan in the heat pump, and that will extract more moisture out than if you blow the fan really high across the coil. So in this operation, it will reduce the fan speed so as to pull that moisture out. Again, we implemented that as a test, and it did make a difference in some, but it didn't solve all problems. So then we said, okay, let's take a look at the geogrid itself, an assessment of the geogrid. Now, we did have some outages of the geogrid, which we notified folks of. And the causes for the outages were sometimes construction issues where holes were put into our geogrid. There were other issues related to that. In one case, there was one sort of an outage where we were optimizing the cooling tower, and we didn't realize when we did something it actually caused a negative consequence of pulling down the geogrid. We had to do some replumbing. Where's Phil? This way. Phil helped us to do some replumbing of the system to make sure that wouldn't be an occurrence again. But when the system was operating, which is the vast majority of the time, it was operating as designed. So it wasn't the issue of the geogrid. So it's kind of like the last thing to check or whatever. Through this process, when we were working with AGB, working with our air conditioning specialists, we were running through the manual J calculations, combing through them. And we started to see some things that were different. First of all, some of the manual J's that were ran like the very beginning of the development by a different contractor, they were some of the assumptions were quite different than the assumptions that we're running today or now. And much of it was some learnings that happened over the course of time. We also realized that some of the assumptions that were used based on the behavior of the geogrid itself, we had learned information and there were better specifications. And also just how the heat pumps were operating, the specifications for them. we had learned over time and talking to the directly to the manufacturers over time, we learned about them. So when we took all these learnings and put them in the manual J's, we started to run them, and for some homes, we saw, lo and behold, these homes would benefit from a higher capacity heat pump. In many other homes, that was not the case, but definitely in some homes. So that was clearly an area that we had not expected, but we found and we learned, and then we shared with AGB. So we go to the next slide. Well, what we learned from the process, we talk about the steps we're going to take, but what we learned was AGB, because the city of Austin wants to be carbon friendly or low carbon, reduce the carbon, and because the Austin Energy wants to reduce the energy demand, manage the demand on their system, it is a rational thing to try to not have people overbuild their heating and cooling equipment. That's a natural thing. It's happening across the U.S. That's a standard thing. But because it's very restricted, there isn't any headroom or isn't any ability to have a margin to handle any learnings or any differences or whatever. It's very thin. And therefore, the result of that is that you will have cases where, or we did have cases where, a larger heat pump would benefit that home, given all the learnings. And so we bumped into this condition where either the humidity was higher than we would like, or than should be, or the temperatures couldn't be hit. So we went to AGB and we said, look, here's what you found. We're following the process. But clearly now with these new learnings, and you can take a look at the data, we're very transparent, you can see that these sets of homes would benefit from a higher capacity. And we're following your process. So isn't there a way for those folks who already have heat pumps and a permit that's already been done and dusted to go back and see if we can make a modification to increase the capacity and be able to address homes that could benefit from that? And they agreed that if we can demonstrate, or the builder can demonstrate, that the manual J should be calculated in a different way, that they would consider that. They would try and be as fair as they could. So we have worked with them to develop this process whereby we do those recalculations, we provide the assumptions, and we also provide other information about the performance of the system from your Nest thermostats, and you can submit that to them, and they have agreed that they would, for those homes where they concur, that they would allow the permit to be increased retrospectively for the returns, so that a larger sized heat pump could be permitted. So with all that in play, and that's taken some time to get through all of that, we are going through the process right now. Actually, Chad is leading some of that discussion to take the new manual J's that we've worked on, these new calculations, submit them methodically to AGB in a formal process, a formal request. They're reviewing them as we speak, and once we get approval on these, then we will meet with every homeowner where there is a defined benefit that's been agreed upon, and discuss with them what their experience is. I guess it's theoretically possible that even though the calculation shows maybe they could benefit in their home, they don't want a different heat pump, whatever, it's fine, or not. We'll find out what their experience has been. We'll collect the Nest data. We'll ask you to share your Nest data with us, because that will be part of the empirical, the real life experience data to say, well, the model is nice, but also this is the experience of the homeowner. This heat pump has been running n number of days, 24 hours a day or whatever, and it's not getting the temperature. So that correlates. That's a good reason. And we also want to reach out to homeowners that have had indoor comfort issues that we don't know about. Many people have come forward, and we know we're going to go reach out to each of them. But if somebody who isn't on our list or whatever, we want them to come forward so we can help them. And I reemphasize that the size of the heat pump or other elements can only go so far. And then it's the lifestyle choices that have a lot to do with how your indoor comfort is. I'll give you one point. The calculations that we do and the ACA standard is that when you run the manual J, all the windows in the entire building that are facing the sun would get solar gains. That would be east, south, and west, so especially south and west. It is assumed that 50%, because the model models all of that area, because that's where the heat's going to come in. And we know what the E rating is, what the thermal resistance of that glass is per the manufacturer's spec of what was built in there. Great. But it presumes that you have 50% shading of those windows. If you do not have 50% shading, the manual J calculations will be lower in terms of the heat your home experiences than what you experience. So the manual J will say maybe this is your heating load, how much cooling you need, but because you don't have that shading on, it's actually here. So when the system is sized here, there's going to be a problem. And that is just the way that it is. That's the accepted practice of the industry. And it is the mandate of AEGB, and we can't say to AEGB, well, in Whisper Valley, we like all of our window shades up all the time, so you have to allow us to do a higher level. We're not in a position to do that. But that's just one item. There's a number of other items that you can look at. And at the end of this presentation, as I mentioned, I have a whole list that Chad has developed, that Austin Energy provided, that are ideas. And some of them are small little things, but some have a big thing. So we will reach out, validate, and identify those homes that could benefit from enhanced. And then for those homes, ESS will replace at our cost for the heat pump, the higher capacity heat pump. And we will also pay for the builder to install that heat pump. So it's not at their cost. The intention that there's no builder nor homeowner cost for this enhancement. And the reason for that is because we're all, as Douglas said, we're all on a journey together. And it is very important that the folks who started with us up front have a very good experience in Whisper Valley. It's important to all of us. Everyone in the room, it's very important too. So we thought that this is just the right thing to do. And it makes a lot of sense. We've learned a lot, quite frankly. You've helped us learn a lot. And so this seemed to be the right thing to do. These will be new heat pumps, so they will come with the standard warranty, the new warranty. And as a side, one of the things that we've realized is having visibility of how the systems are working is super important. Because that's one of the things, to be honest, you were all of our meters when you contacted us and said, it's too hot in our house or the humidity is too high. We'd rather have more visibility to the system so that we ourselves can kind of figure out what's going on. So one of the things that we're doing, we've already taken steps to do this for the instrumenting of all of the geogrid itself. We've put in lots of instruments, new things that we've done, so we can see how the geogrid is working minute to minute, temperatures, pressures, all that. We're also working with the heat pump manufacturers to get similar information about how the heat pumps work. But we've also been testing out monitoring, in-home monitoring. There were actually 15 homes that volunteered last year to be part of this Wiser Energy Monitoring Program. We installed the Wiser Energy Monitoring from Schneider. And then Schneider came to us just as we were really very frustrated. And they said, I don't think this is working out so well. And we said, yeah, we know. It's not working out so well. So they said, all right, don't worry about it. We selected another company called Sense, who actually Shell's familiar with because we were an investor in them. And we think it's going to be much better, it's much simpler, it's much better, more reliable. So we said, well, that's super cool, but we want to try it out for a while on just 2 folks to make sure it really is before we roll it out. So we have done that, and we're now evaluating how well it's worked. We did it over the course of the summer for 2 homes. I've been looking at it, we've had people looking at it, it's pretty good, it's not perfect. We need to make sure that when we do roll it out, we communicate what you can rely on and what you shouldn't rely on. It's pretty good. But our intention is to roll that platform out to the community at the option for the homeowner. If the homeowner doesn't want it, that's fine. But this, again, would be an ability for both of us to be able to have more visibility in terms of how are the homes performing from an energy efficiency and operating point. So that's basically a conclusion of our action plan. And again, what I leave you with is the bit on the bottom, which is really our commitment to achieving zero energy capable homes, to do it comfortably and affordably. And if we go to the next slide, thank you. And I just wanted to point out that we are going to have an open house, ESS open house, December 5th from 6 to 8, to deal with all sorts of other questions that you might have about ESS that weren't the topic of today. And just to meet the rest of the team, we have a new CEO, John Toll, who just came on board. Axel Lurch, who many of you may know, he will be there, and the whole team will be there, and he gives you a chance to really, talk about all the elements of the ESS program that you might have questions about. If you go to the next slide, you can see here, this is taken from the City of Austin Building Code. Yes, indeed, AGB does have the right, given the jurisdiction, to regulate these things, according to the building code. And if you go to the next series of slides, these are the recommendations which we'll send out to you, and you can take a look at them. If you go through it, there's like a lot. All right, then you can call. Okay. All right. So let me stop.